everyone, and welcome to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson, the personal finance show focused on moving you forward financially. On today's show, we're asking the questions, are you feeling stressed about your finances? Are you struggling to make ends meet? And if you are, you're not alone. Recent surveys show that many Canadians are feeling the financial strain of high inflation and rising interest rates. And many are really worried about their financial future. They're worried about putting food on the table, worried about paying those bills every month. Some are even worried about possibly losing their homes. So if you're among them, we're going to be sharing some really great advice for you today. Over the next half hour, we'll have some advice to help you manage your finances and deal with the debt as we continue to face this economic uncertainty. And joining me today for our discussion, we have Nathan Sugeng, Senior Vice President and Licensed Insolvency Trustee at BDO Canada. Nathan, welcome to Money Matters. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get into our discussion, can you share just a little bit about your background and what you do as a licensed insolvency trustee at BDO?
Thanks, I'd love to. So as a licensed insolvency trustee, I get to meet a lot of different people from all different walks of life and basically help them with any troubles that they're having financially. It could be debt related, it could just be budget related, but anything where they're struggling and just need a little bit of advice, a little bit of help, or sometimes a lot of advice, a lot of help in getting them into a much better space financially. And the best part of my job is generally when I help them on the financial side, it really puts a lot of ease on the mental health and wellness side as well. So we see an almost immediate impact right away. Prior to doing this, I find that I'm a little bit unique in the industry because I've been a licensed insolvency trustee, but I've also worked at a large major bank and for over 10 years. So I've also been on the creditor side. So I have a pretty unique perspective on what they look at, what their expectations are. So when we are negotiating with creditors, I have that sort of inside knowledge, so to speak, on what buttons to press and what makes them tick. So it really makes my job as a licensed insolvency trustee and working out solutions with creditors on behalf of debtors a lot easier and effective.
Well, today we're going to be talking about sort of the affordability crisis that many Canadians are facing right now. There's been numerous surveys showing that Canadians are worried, including many here in Ontario, as a result of the rising interest rates, the higher cost of goods, such as our utilities and our gas and our groceries. There was a recent FP Canada Financial Stress Index survey that said that about 48% of Canadians are losing sleep over money this year, which is an increase from last year. And about 36% of Canadians are experiencing mental health challenges, such as anxiety or even depression. So, Nathan, when you hear these types of statistics about how this financial stress is affecting people, what are your initial thoughts there?
Well, I think that, there's, like you said, there's lots of surveys out there, and some of it is pretty daunting. So, there's another survey where more than half of the people said that they're $200 away or less from not being able to pay their monthly bills. Another survey said that there's more than half that are concerned about their level of debt. So not just their budget, but just the debt load that they're handling. And there's about 2/3 that say that they'll be in financial trouble if interest rates go up any further. So is it alarming? Absolutely. But I guess what my takeaway is that in the people I speak to, not just professionally, but anecdotally through friends, family, just people in the community, I think everyone is facing this. So I guess my message would be that you're not alone. If you're feeling the pinch, it's nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about because everybody is feeling that pain, and it is real. So it's not just you. You shouldn't feel like it's personalized to you. You did something bad. You did something wrong. It's affecting Canadians across the country almost equally. But there is hope. So, and again, going back to what I do for a living, there are options, and I know we're going to tackle that on the latter half of this program, but there are very reasonable and viable solutions to help Canadians out there. So looking forward to that part of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the rising interest rate, there was an Angus Reid survey that said that about 34% of Canadians, they're expecting significant challenges in their financial situation due to interest rates hikes. And about 59% say that interest rate increases will have a negative impact on their personal finances. There is also a recent survey from Equifax Canada, which talked about the delinquencies in our debt. So it shows that delinquencies, particularly in Ontario, so this is missed payments or late payments, in Ontario, we're the highest non-mortgage delinquency rates of all the provinces. We're second only to British Columbia. And so Canadians, I think, are feeling much less optimistic about their financial futures than perhaps they were 3 or 4 years ago. There's another poll that says that 44% of people are feeling less hopeful now than they were previously about their financial future. And so, Nathan, when you hear about these statistics about how people are living so close to the edge when it comes to their finances, what are your thoughts about that?
You know, it's a problem that I've foreseen for a long time. And again, I'm going back to my days as a banker. When banks choose or decide to lend people money, it's not just on a whim and a prayer. They have a set process. There's a major formula that they use, and it's called total debt servicing ratio, or it'll be a debt servicing ratio, or it's something of that nature. Depends on which bank or creditor that you go to. But fundamentally, it's the same everywhere. What they do is they take a look at your gross income, and as a percentage of your gross income, so this is your income before any income taxes have been taken off, they budget 40% of that gross income to service debt. So that 40%, so for example, if you make $1,000 gross per month, that means that out of that $1,000, the bank is willing to lend you up to a $400 a month payment. So the way the math works is they go backwards. So $400 a month is the payment that you can afford. They factor in the interest rate, and then they can determine that, based on the interest rate of the day, that might be a $20,000 loan. The flaw in this is there's twofold. One is it's using gross income. So income tax is a big part of everybody's life. So you don't have $1,000 a month net after your income taxes are taken away. So even if 40% of your income taxes are 40% of your income is taxed, that really means that the bank is willing to give you $400 out of the $600 that you have remaining just to pay debts. So this is not including groceries, utilities, things of that nature. So it stretches you to begin with. The problem that we're facing today is that this is based on the interest rate at the time you got the loan. With interest rates rising, if you're on a variable payment plan, your payment goes up. So that $200 of surplus that you had is going to get squeezed. Even with mortgages, the federal government felt that there need to be greater protection. So they built in what's called a stress test. So when you qualify for a mortgage under the same formula, they artificially inflate the interest rate to make sure that there's adequate coverage. The problem is that the buffer that they use is 2%. Well, we all know that the interest rates over the past 12 months have gone over way more than 2%. So even with this worst case stress test scenario, the interest rates today are beyond that when people first qualified. So it's not an individual problem. It's a process problem across the board, because this is how all the banks work. So again, it's not to blame the individual. The banks, if anything, gave the people too much credit and didn't provide enough protections in case of situations like today.
And it really is uncertain as we move forward over the next few years, because we know that household debt is rising in Canada. The latest Equifax trend report says that our household debt ratio now here in Canada is near 185%, which means that Canadians owe $1.85 to every dollar that we earn. And unfortunately, it means that Canada is actually one of the most indebted countries of all the G7 nations. And so when we take all of that into consideration, it's really no surprise that the information coming from the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy is saying that consumer insolvency filings are increasing nationwide. And we're seeing pre-pandemic levels at this point. Nationally, they rose over 23%. Bankruptcies rose about 6.7%. Consumer proposals are up 29.3% this year. And those numbers are actually even higher here in Ontario, which means Ontario is feeling the pinch, it seems, a little bit more than some of the other provinces. when it comes to filing an insolvency, whether it's a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal. Are you seeing this increase in your local office as a trustee?
Yeah, we definitely see very similar percentages in our offices. What I will say is that we need to take a little bit of a deeper look between those numbers, because it's comparing year over year. So the 24% year over year is based on what the filings were last year in 2022. What a lot of people may not realize is during the pandemic, insolvency filings fell through the floor. It actually decreased by 30, almost 40%. So there's good news and bad news. The good news is that although the year over year numbers are high, it's not all-time, we're not hitting all-time records. So you're not hearing that message that bankruptcy filings are hitting an all-time record. You're hearing things like we're reaching pre-pandemic levels. Well, pre-pandemic levels weren't necessarily, over the top either. So I guess the message is we are seeing a bit more of a return to normalcy. That being said, I still think that there is a bit of a storm looming, because what I do know, based on my experience with the industry, there's a ramp up. There's never a flood. So it's never, something happens in the market and then all of a sudden things spike. It's generally a linear upward trend. So we are seeing that trend. I don't think we've seen the roof. So the good news is that we're not at any all-time high, but we are trending higher for sure. And it just simply means that people are struggling. People do need help. And the other thing I'll sort of maybe end with is that insolvency filings doesn't mean the end. What insolvency filing means is that Canadians have tapped into tools in our system that are allowing them to right-size their finances. So it just means that people are accessing the tools that are legislated and available to them to right the ship. It doesn't mean that they've lost or they've given up or that they're beyond the point of no return. They've just simply accessed tools that are available to them to make their lives better.
Now, in the couple of minutes that we have left before the break, I just want to briefly talk about the homeowner situation. There was a survey from Manulife Bank of Canada that said nearly 1 in 4 homeowners, which is really 25% of homeowners, are concerned that they're going to need to sell their homes as the interest rates go up. And already 18% of homeowners admit they're already at the stage that they can't afford their homes. Do you have any thoughts about those statistics?
Yeah, and it's not surprising because, again, with those that are on either a variable monthly payment, so if your interest rates goes up, your monthly payment goes up, or your mortgage is coming up for renewals. So if your mortgage was originally $500 because your interest rate was 3%, well, if the interest rate now is 6%, I think 6.29 is the going 4 or 5 year rate. It means that your mortgage payment has doubled. So naturally, that's a massive blow to your budget. So it's not surprising at all. But again, can't wait till we jump in the second half, because we do have ways to help fix it.
Absolutely. And so if you, our viewers, are among those who are struggling to make ends meet, if you're struggling to keep up with those monthly payments, maybe you're a homeowner and you're worried about what's going to happen in the future, Nathan's going to have some really great advice for you after the break when Money Matters returns.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
After a night out with your friends, there's always options for getting home safely. You could call your BFF, your mom or dad, whoever you can count on for a safe ride home. You could call your favorite cab company or 1-888 taxi guy. Or you could use the Arrive Alive smartphone app to help you choose your ride. Be it a friend, transit, or taxi, getting home safely is app easy. Now available for iOS and Android devices. Visit arrivealive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive. Drive sober.
Focus better.
Partner better.
Sleep better.
Breathe better.
Love better. Work better. Friend better. Unwind better.
Everything gets better when you get active.
Welcome back to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. My guest today is Nathan Sugeng, Senior Vice President and Licensed Insolvency Trustee at BDO Canada. And before the break, we were talking about the financial stress that so many Canadians are feeling right now, including many here in Ontario. Already tight budgets have become even tighter. some are even unmanageable, and people are really worried and feeling overwhelmed and losing sleep about their financial situations. So now I want to focus on the solutions that might be available to people. So Nathan, for those who are feeling that overwhelmed feeling about their finances, how can they start to take better control?
So the first thing is the way I explain it to people that makes the most sense is it's very similar to when you have a health problem, right? So if you're not feeling well, sometimes you'll go on the internet, you'll do a search, but ultimately, if you want the best help, you're going to go see a physician or, even a nurse or a nurse practitioner. And dealing with your finances is really the same way. There's a lot of information out there on the internet that you can get. There's a lot of different people that you can talk to, but licensed insolvency trustees go through extensive training as well as licensing through the federal government in order to provide these types of services. So not to be overconfident or to downplay the role of doctors, but the system is the same. If you're dealing with financial situations, the best thing to do is to reach out to a licensed insolvency trustee like ourselves and go through basically a financial wellness checkup. And basically we go through your finances, very similar to if you walk into a doctor's office, they go through a bunch of questions. We're going to go through the same. And we're going to go through a lot of detailed information. And ultimately at the end, come up with an option or solution that will help get you back on track and feeling much better on a financial level.
Can you go into a little bit more detail about what a first consultation might look like with a licensed insolvency trustee?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question because I think a lot of people fear that the unknown. And one of the things I find the hardest step for people to make is to make that call because their initial fear is that they're going to be criticized, they're going to be, raked over the coals, so to speak, for doing something bad or not doing as well as they could have. It's not a report card. We're not going through and giving you a report card. We're going through and we're going to ask you detailed information about your budget, your assets, your debts. And it's really business and professional life. We're not here to judge. We're here to help. So if anything, all that we're doing is we're taking a look at the present state and we're looking at the future and see how we can make that future look better. We're rarely going to dwell in the past. The only time that we really dwell in the past is based on anything that the person shares with us and really more from a coaching perspective. A lot of people think that most people that come see us is because they overspent or they mismanage their finances. And it's actually the farthest from the truth. There are those types of situations, but it's a small percentage. The top three, brackets of people that come in and see us are people that have lost their job. They've gone through some sort of catastrophic financial situation like a separation or divorce. And the third is poor health that has led to a reduction in income. So, you can imagine that these are far from being bad with your finances and mismanaging your affairs.
Absolutely. Now, when you initially meet with someone, what are maybe some of the options that you would talk about?
So, things really changed for the industry in 2009. That was the last major change in the Bankruptcy Insolvency Act, which is the legislation that provides these different solutions to debtors. In the past, bankruptcies was probably the largest percentage of files that we handled. Nowadays, the largest by far. So when I say by far, I want to say well over 50%. In some offices, it's closer to 75, 80% of the files are what we call consumer proposals. And what consumer proposals are is a negotiated settlement with the creditors. So it's like a consolidation loan, if that makes sense for a lot of people, but with a lot more teeth. Because when you're dealing with multiple creditors, sometimes it's very difficult. So if you've got 5 creditors, it's very difficult to convince all 5 to settle on the debt at a number that's more reasonable based on your current situation, not based on what you applied, but based on what is today. So if you've lost your job or if you've in a different job that has a lower income, this is a mechanism that will help sort of right size that debt. And because it's legislated, it's federal law, that's where it has the teeth. So it prevents your creditors from collecting while we're negotiating. And it's widely known and accepted by creditors because they know that when you're tapping into this resource, you have to go through a licensed insolvency trustee so that all the information that the creditor gets has been reviewed and vetted. And so that it's a really organized way to not just deal with one creditor at a time, but to deal with all creditors at the same time.
Well, and you mentioned before about the stress that someone might feel just to make that initial phone call to speak with someone. And I think part of that comes from I think, a lot of myths that surround what a licensed insolvency trustee does and what the options are that are available to them, especially those that own assets or own a home. Can you maybe clarify or straighten out those sort of myths that surround that?
Yeah, so the reason why I say that, the phone call is the hardest thing is just based on, over 17 years of practicing as a licensed insolvency trustee, because usually, 9.5% out of, 95% of the time after we have that initial meeting with somebody, even we haven't done anything yet, just we've gone through their options and explained how the options work, they're so relieved. And it's immediate where, you can see it on their faces, but not only that, they tell us that, wow, I had no idea it would be this helpful. They tell us so many times that making that call was so hard for them, but after that first session with us, they feel that it was, they should have called, years ago or months ago. As far as the myths of bankruptcy, there are tons. And the biggest myth is that if I go bankrupt, I'm going to lose everything. And, the reality, and this happens a lot in our industry, reality versus the fiction is that you hardly lose anything at all. And even if you're a homeowner, it's rare that you would lose your home. It's not to say, I can't say with absolute certainty you won't lose your home. But what I can tell you is that initial consultation with an LIT, licensed insolvency trustee, is a free, no obligation meeting. So even if at that meeting we say that, here's what's going to happen with your house and it's not what you want to hear, you're not tied to anything. But at least now you know what is what. You know what is fact and you know what is fiction. But in the vast majority of cases, usually keeping the house is up to the debtor, not the creditor or up to us as the licensed insolvency trustee. It's usually the debtor that chooses whether they want to keep the house or not, if that makes a little bit more clear sense.
Absolutely, it does. And so for those who are feeling that extra strain right now, are there any warning signs that they should be keeping an eye out to maybe trigger that phone call to talk to a professional?
Yeah, absolutely. So one is, if you're not doing it already, you should be monitoring your bank account on a regular basis. And I'm not saying every day, but generally once or twice a week, just to see what the balances are, what's coming in, what's going out. So one early warning sign, obviously, is that when you're looking at your balance and seeing what bills are coming due, there's not going to be enough in your account. And you're going to have to tap into something else, like a line of credit, like a credit card. So if you're now using debt to pay debt, that is absolutely a big warning sign, a big flag. The other quick thing that you should be doing is that when you do get your monthly credit statements, your credit card bills and things like that, you should be, if you're carrying a balance, you should be comparing what the current month's balance is versus previous months. So if, let's say, the last 6 months, your average outstanding balance is $5,000 in your credit card, but now you're starting to see that average balance increase month over month, it means that your credit card debt is growing, and your credit card debt's not the best debt that you want to see grow. So that would be the second biggest, warning sign that I would look out for. Those two are probably the two easiest and biggest ones to flag.
I often think about, the people that I speak with as well. If someone is already getting those collection calls, or if they are losing sleep every night, I feel, those are often triggers as well, that if those are hanging over your head, it's definitely time to speak with somebody that's a professional. Now, we hear, Nathan, some advertisements about maybe some debt consultants or credit counseling. Do they offer the same types of services, or is there a difference between those and a licensed insolvency trustee?
There's actually a very big difference. So as I mentioned a little bit before, the tools that we use come from federal legislation. And in order to access these tools, you have to go through a licensed insolvency trustee. So what the licensed part of my title means is that the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, which is the government department or the government body that provides these licenses, they've granted us the ability to file these types of programs on behalf of people. Unless you're licensed, you can't do that. And what we've been finding a lot in our industry, there's a lot of what they call debt consultants or debt advisors. And what they do is, it sounds similar. They'll sit down with you, they'll do an initial consultation, they'll provide you with recommendations. But if any of those recommendations lead to either a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, they can't do it. They will have to refer that or have you approach a licensed insolvency trustee. Now, there is a big difference between how we operate. These people, these debt advisors, because they're not getting paid through the work of doing the consumer proposal or the bankruptcy, they charge a fee for that consultation. With the licensed insolvency trustee, if you go direct to a licensed insolvency trustee, that consultation is free. So in a lot of cases, and when I say the fee, the fee that you're saving of going directly to a licensed insolvency trustee versus a debt advisor can be anywhere between $1,500 or more. So that's $1,500 that you wouldn't have to pay going direct to source. And I find that a lot of people aren't going direct to source because, again, there's that stigma that they're going to see a licensed insolvency trustee. We're going to give you, the run of the mill, we're going to blame you. We're going to take away all of your things. And again, that's fiction. It's not fact.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, but before we end the segment, do you have any final advice for our viewers who might be struggling out there?
Yeah, the best advice is to not delay. And the reason why I say that is in a lot of cases that we see, there's two parts to this. So one is the earlier that you're able to address it, generally the more options you have available. So the worst thing that we hear in our line of work is that when we eventually see somebody, but it's too late, and their options are now limited. So the earlier you can address it, the more options you have available to you. This includes non-bankruptcy, non-consumer options as well. So, and that's part of our mandate. We're not here to just put you into a consumer proposal or put you into a bankruptcy. We're looking at other options as well. It could be consolidation loan, it could be refinancing your mortgage or some other program. So that's one. Step one, deal with it sooner rather than later so you can get more options. And number two is, like I said, based on all the people that we see, you will find so much comfort and relief just knowing what the options are. So just on that basis, coming in and dealing with us right away gives you that peace of mind right away. It doesn't mean you have to do anything. There's some times where we see people and they do something months or sometimes even years later, but because they've seen us so early in the process, they've been put their mind at ease.
Well, Nathan, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your advice. And I also want to thank our viewers for watching. Until next time, I'm Shannon Jackson.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
The regulars, the guys who keep this place in business. Last week, they had something to celebrate. Jason had just finished university, so they toasted his profs